So what to do when we need to communicate our part of the job, our part of the project, but no one from our collaborators or peers or bosses actually understands our domain. Imagine this situation. You are a biologist talking to economists or people from the marketing team or people from the finance team and so on. So how can we share our contribution in those super big, messy projects when there are many people involved, many different expertise, and chances are we are not really understanding each other. But of course, we need them to understand us, and we need to basically make sure that this part of the project is handled correctly and that they know what is our contribution and our impact in that specific part. This is a very, very interesting question, and I feel not many people talk about it and about the importance of how we share information within a multidisciplinary project, which are the reality nowadays, right? Whether you're working in a pharmaceutical company or you're working in science or you're working, I would say, in engineering, in any domain, you have to be able to share information with people who are not from your domain and from your expertise for two reasons. First of all, because that's the whole point of the project, right? To mix different brains and different minds and to create something all together. And secondly, because you want your impact to be recognized, right? You want your work to be recognized by others. And how are they going to recognize it if they do not actually understand what is it that you did in your part of the project? So what I see happening quite a lot is this problem of people sharing their expertise and their part of the project in a way they would talk to a peer or someone who is really, really into the same niche and STEM profession, I would say. So they speak to others the same way they would speak to a peer who knows this specific stuff, who is very, very familiar with the niche and so on. So why is this a problem? Well, first of all, it's a problem because people are not trained to think the same way you are. This means that you can maybe imagine as you were talking to a marketing person, right? They are trained to use a different jargon. They are trained to think in a different way when it comes to a problem and so on. So it makes sense that it's somehow difficult for them to understand your point of view and your expertise and your contribution by consequence, right? So this is something that we need to tackle very, very early on, because if we do not do that, we run this risk of really not being recognized in the team and people not understanding what is our part, like what is the contribution that we did in this project. So if we do not, now that we realize that we should not speak to others the same way we would speak to ourselves, what is it that we can do? So the first thing that we have to learn how to do is to understand what is the interest of that person, like what is the impact they are interested in. For example, again, the same example, right? A marketing person probably wants to know how are the users going to use it, how can they market it, what are the benefits, and so on. A person that tackles finances probably wants to know about the rentability, how fast the product can be delivered, and so on. So those are all different aspects of the same thing, and it is our job to make sure that we can communicate that to them, right? To make sure that our part of the project is done in a way that is supposed to be done, the same way we would expect from them to speak in a language that is more general or more familiar to us. So this is something that we really need to be aware of this bias that we think that everyone retains and shares information in the same way we do. And I always laugh with my clients when I tell them, like, okay, you have a very STEM biased brain, which is completely normal, and a STEM professional, so if you're an engineer, scientist, data scientist, developer, chances are that you think in this paradigm of cause versus consequence, like A causes B and so on. But people from the general public, people who are not in STEM, in our specific disciplines, don't tend to think about that. They tend to think in forms of impact, like why is A important? Why should I even care about A or B, and so on. So this is something that we need to take care of and rewire our brain to be able to speak in that way, to have this laser focus so that other people understand us as soon as we start speaking or as soon as they read our report and so on. So how do we do that? This is actually a skill that requires, as any skill, it requires practice, and it requires what I mentioned before, this rewiring and restructuring of how we share, how we retain and how we share information with others. And first of all, the first step is to become aware of how we retain information, how we like to store information and explain, if you will, in a simple language, explain stuff to ourselves. How do we explain stuff to ourselves? Do we give ourselves examples? Do we provide examples from the real world or from some our experience? Do we learn that by experience? Are we a visual type that we need to visualize information and so on? So once we learn that about ourselves, it is much easier to start thinking about what other people need. Like, what is the way that I can make sure that these people understand me? What are their needs? How can I serve them in this presentation? How can I serve them in this report, in this project? And the thing that I always like to say to my clients, the less they have to think, the better. Which means that the less they have to analyze, think, really process that information that you're sharing, the more likely they are to follow you and really follow through that entire project or project report or project presentation that you are giving. So, having said that, I wanted to invite you to my coaching program in which we train exactly that. So we do a complete rewiring of how you perceive information and how you communicate to others in order to be recognized at your job, in order to get promotions, and especially in order to get funding. Because if people who have money have to think about it, they are confused, they're probably not going to give you the funds. And we all know that, especially in STEM, we work by project, we really need that funding to keep our science going, to keep our projects going, and so on. So in case you are interested in something like that and you would like to sort of really work on those skills, I will leave a link down below in the description where you can schedule a completely free discovery call with me, where we can discuss your struggles, your challenges, your current challenges in your STEM career, and of course see if we are a good fit to work together. So thank you so much for watching this video, and see you soon in another video. Bye bye.